And when he said to me, you want to make some money, I said, He says, I'm not talking about that. I'm asking, do you want to make some money by running to the store for people? He pointed to the building. He said, this is a theater. I said, I know, it's the Apollo Theater. He said, there are people inside rehearsing for a show, and they're going to need somebody to go get their coffee, their meals, their shoes shine, their clothes pressed. If you do that, they'll give you tips. That's when the light bulb went off in my head. I started running errands after school once I did my homework. I started running errands on the weekends. I started doing it during the summer. And all the while, my pockets started getting full with money. So I would put on and buy some new clothes, because the clothes I was wearing, they were dirty, they were old. I got myself a haircut, I got my hygiene together. And then also, I would come home with groceries. And I would feed my little brothers and sisters, because my two older brothers and sisters, they went on to live their adult lives. I was left with the little ones, and my mom had her demons she was chasing, so she wasn't there a lot. And I became the man of the house at 16. And I would come home with these groceries, feed them, and then I would bribe my brothers and sisters into doing their homework. You do your homework, I'll give you 50 cents. You do that paragraph, I'll give you a quarter. You read this book to me loud, I'll give you another 15 cents. Now, the education theme was pounded into my head by a man that performed here who took an incredible liking to me. I guess he felt sorry for me because I was poor, I had problems. His name was James Brown. Now, James Brown kept telling me that, boy, you get yourself a good education, and later on, it'll put you in a position to get yourself a good job, and you got to go to school. You know, he kept pounding that school education, I was so sick and tired of that man talking about education, but there was a reason for that. And what he would also do with some of the tips that he gave me, James Brown would have me go down to the African bookstore down the block. I had to buy 2 books. I mispronounced a word. James Brown would have me write that word over 25 times. And I thought that that was very odd, that this man was correcting my diction. When James Brown had the worst diction of anybody, I never knew what the heck that man was saying. He was saying, boy, no, repeat what I just said. You know, what's the only, no, that's that. You know what I just said? He said, boy, when you say that, you put a T on the end of it. It's not that, it's that. Yeah, I did the same thing, you know, and I never understood. But what happened was James Brown wanted me to get this education. And with those themes that he kept putting into my head, I kept telling my brothers and sisters that. Till after a while, it became an obsession with us to get ourselves a good education. I'm from a town called Mount Vernon, New York. And in that town, me and my family, we were known as the poor, dirty Mitchells. That's what people used to call us. They used to throw rocks at us. Kids would come by and slap us. Sometimes they would spit on us because we didn't have what they had, you know. But that education theme stuck with me, and every time I would get my report card, I would let James Brown know the marks that I got. And he would send me money, right? You know, when my grades were great. And then here comes the night I'm about to graduate from high school. I call up Mr. Brown. I said, Mr. Brown, I'm graduating from high school, and tonight me and my friends are going down to the Apollo to celebrate by attending amateur night. And this is the last time I'm going to see some of them because they're going off to college. What'd you say, young man? Because they're going off to college, right? He says, well, what about you? You said your grades were good. Why aren't you going to college? I said, because my folks don't have any money. He said, call me tomorrow. James Brown hung up the phone. He called up a friend of his, a guy by the name of Marvin Gaye. They got together and they paid for me to go to college. Now I tell you, what a blessing, right? And that education theme, me and my family, we became obsessed with getting good education. Now, today, right now, instead of people calling me, my brothers and sisters, the dirty poor Mitchells, we're now doctors, we're lawyers, we're clergy, we're scientists, we're entrepreneurs, we're real estate brokers, we're business people. I'm an actor, I'm an author. Your boy's an author, give it up for me. Yes, indeed. I have a book out that just was released. The book is called They Call Me Mr. Apollo. Now, so many wonderful people have been in my life over the years. As I said, I'm an actor. The first movie that I ever did, I got a part from a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Denzel Washington. He was in my wedding, I was in his wedding. We're very, very close. And we all come from Mount Vernon, so we always looked out for each other, you know. In the book, it's got pictures of me and Denzel, me and Smokey, me and James Brown, B.B. King, Anthony Hamilton, Tracy Morgan with 30 Rock. We used to do comedy here at the Apollo in 1985. We started the Apollo Comedy Hour. And then he went on to pursue his career in films and things like that. And I just got consumed with staying here at the Apollo. So well, I went from running errands at the Apollo Theater to now helping to run the Apollo Theater. Kids, let me tell you something, little ones. You have got to dream big. Dream big, man. You can do and be anything you want to be. Anything. You're still young, but you got to work hard. When you're in school and the teachers teach you something on the board and you don't understand it, raise your hand. Say, excuse me, could you go over that again for me, please? Because I didn't understand. Even if you have to raise your hand a second time. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I still understand. Could you go over it again for me? You have to understand what they're teaching, because when it comes time to take the test, you have to pass. The only way you're going to pass, you have to know what the teacher's teaching. So don't be afraid to raise your hand. Don't worry about what those other kids think, because the other kids don't know either. They just waiting for somebody to ask the teacher. So make sure you put in that extra work, all right? And you can be anything, anything you want. All these successful people that you hear about, they're not from another planet. They're from your neighborhood, my neighborhood, your block, my block. They're from right, but they worked hard. That's the only way you're going to get anything. You got to work hard. If you don't work hard, nothing will come your way. So work hard. Now, guys, let me tell you about this theater. OMG. I've been involved with this theater over 48 years, and this building was built in 1914, 98 years ago, right? Now, when it was first built, it wasn't called the Apollo Theater. This building had another name, and it had another purpose as well. The building was originally called Hertig and Siemens New Burlesque Theater. This was a burlesque house, you know. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So this was a burlesque house. Not only that, contrary to what everybody's heard about this as being like a black theater or whatever, well, originally, this was an all-white theater in which African Americans, we weren't allowed to come in here in 1914 when it opened up as a burlesque house. We weren't allowed to sit down and see shows. We weren't allowed to perform on the stage. And the reasons for that, they varied. But one of the reasons was that Harlem, this neighborhood, it was different, totally different years ago than it is right now. Harlem was an area where if you lived in Harlem back during the turn of the century, you had to live in a section of Harlem where only people of your ethnic background lived. For instance, the west side of Harlem, it was where only our Irish brothers and sisters lived. They had the west side. The east side of Harlem was where only our Italian and Latino brothers and sisters lived. They had that only. Now, where we are right now, Central Harlem, this area was inhabited by our Dutch and Jewish brothers and sisters only. Now you say, wait a minute there, Mr. Apollo, you mentioned all these groups, but you didn't mention African Americans. I thought black people were always in Harlem. Well, we have always been here, always. But there wasn't a lot of us here years ago as there is now. How are you, Angie? All right, and the few that did live here back then, they had to live on certain blocks and in certain buildings. Now, most people don't know, and they just found this out recently, that the place in New York City where African Americans first lived as a community, it was downtown, not too far from where the World Trade Center area is right now and Wall Street, down that area. That's where our black people first lived as a community, not here in Harlem. Now, the fact that we lived down there, over time, that fact was covered up and hidden from the world. The powers that ran things, they didn't want future people to know that slavery was practiced up here in the North. The way American history has it, slavery was just done in the South, when in fact, slave ships would come up the Hudson River into New York Harbor. They would dock down there on Wall Street, and that's where they unloaded my ancestors in shackles and chains, and they were bought and sold down there. And when they died, that's where they buried them. Now, in 1991, this construction company was digging down near the World Trade Center area. They were digging to build this government building, the General Services Building. As they dug deeper to build the parking lot for it, that's when they stumbled upon an African burial ground, a big, huge 6-acre cemetery. Howard University, one of the leading black colleges in the country, they got permission to dig up the bodies they found down there and examine them. They found the bodies of almost 20,000 black people buried deep below the ground. After further research on the bodies, that's when they discovered that some of the bodies that they dug up, these were the bodies of the African slaves that were forced to build most of New York City. African slaves built New York, but they didn't want future generations to know that. So to hide them, they built streets on top of the cemetery so that no one would ever find the bodies of my ancestors. I'm not lying. They planted these big trees all over the cemetery so that no one would ever find the bodies, and even big buildings as big as this building. They were built all over the cemetery so that no one would ever find the bodies. Well, when the word got out, we said, wait a minute. How are you going to build a parking lot on top of the graves of our ancestors? That's very disrespectful. So they allowed us to dig up the bodies. We went to Africa, brought back 4 African chiefs to New York so that we can give our ancestors whose bodies we found a proper African burial. And then some of the bodies were reburied right downtown on Duane and Broadway. There's an area cornered off called the African Burial Ground. It's down there. I've been going there for 6 years. Every Sunday at 5 o'clock. If you want to know where I am, that's where you'll find me. And I don't care whether it's snow, whether it's raining. And I wear this. I've been wearing this for 6 years. This represents the shackles that was on the wrists of my ancestors when they were brought here in bondage, you know. So anyway, that's a good trip that you can take the kids to. They will really, get so much knowledge because they don't teach the struggle of African Americans in school. They don't. I promise you they don't teach the truth. All right. Now, let me tell you what happened, how this building became known as the Apollo. Remember I told you this was a burlesque house? Well, in the early 1930s, New York had elected this new no-nonsense mayor. Did anybody ever tell you look like Geraldine Ferraro? No? My God, you are so striking. You look just like her. You guys remember Geraldine Ferraro? She ran for president years ago. Because when I first saw you out there, I said, oh, Miss Ferraro's coming, you know? But that's not her husband. What's going on here, you know? But anyway, in the early 1930s, New York elected this new no-nonsense mayor. His name was Fiorello LaGuardia. And Mayor LaGuardia publicly hated burlesque. He hated it publicly. Privately, I think he was a little freaky-deaky, but that's another story. But he hated burlesque so much that he threatened to shut down every single burlesque theater in New York. He went on this campaign to tell the citizens of New York that burlesque was starting to become too vulgar, too risque, and it was promoting prostitution. So he says, I'm going to shut them down. He threatened to do it. Then he went out and he did exactly that. This man closed every burlesque house in Midtown, every burlesque house in Lower Manhattan, and every burlesque house in Harlem, including this building, which was then known as Hertig and Siemens New Burlesque Theater. This building was shut down in 1932. 2 years later, 1934, 3 Jewish brothers, they come in and they buy this building. Now, they weren't brothers by blood. They were just my Jewish brothers, right? So they buy this building, and they were the ones that changed the name of the building from Hertig and Siemens New Burlesque Theater to the Apollo Theater. And the reason they renamed it the Apollo Theater is based on Greek mythology. See, in Greek mythology, as you all know, they have different names for their gods. And each god represents a different thing. Apollo, he was the Greek god that represented the sun and music and entertainment and poetry and healing and strength and good messages of prophecy and this and that. And these were just some of the elements that these owners wanted to bring to this theater. And that's why it was renamed the Apollo Theater. 1934, when they bought this building, it was also during the tail end of a wonderful period here in Harlem. It was called the Harlem Renaissance. Have you guys heard that term before? Yes. It was a wonderful time when black culture and entertainment and literature and activism, it was very popular. Our white brothers and sisters wanted to see black people perform, but they weren't allowed because the theater didn't allow blacks in their theaters. So they heard about wonderful performers like Fats Waller
They heard about Cab Calloway. They heard about Duke Ellington. They heard about poets like Langston Hughes and writers like James Baldwin, but they weren't able to see them. So the guys who bought this theater in 1934, they said, since no other theaters in Harlem allow, quote, colored people in their building, we're going to be the first. And this was the first theater in Harlem to have presented on their stage the first all, quote, colored review. Now, the owners didn't know any black entertainers personally that they can invite to come in. They didn't know anybody personally. But they did know about, of this one very popular African-American actor who lived here in Harlem back then. His name was Ralph Cooper. So they approached Cooper and they said, Mr. Cooper, we just bought the Apollo Theater and we want to start bringing in some of those colored reviews. Now, our audience is going to be all white, but we want one of those colored shows that you people do. Is there a show that you can put together? Ralph says, absolutely, absolutely. Ralph Cooper went out and got this orchestra, the Benny Carter Orchestra. They wore long-tailed tuxedos, white starched shirts, white bow ties. Ralph also went out and got 16 absolutely drop-dead gorgeous African-American female dancers. These sisters were fine, too. And they were doing their ballet, and they were and the orchestra was playing their music, and the audience, they could not believe what they were seeing. They had never seen a wonderful production like this. They thought that all that black people did was those old coon shows. You know, y'all come on up in here. We gonna give y'all a good. They didn't realize we could do wonderful shows because they were never able to see us doing it. Now that show that Ralph Cooper put together, it was done here on January 26, 1934. The show was called Jazz a la carte. They're doing a recreation of it in a few weeks here at the Apollo. And that show, Jazz a la carte, it became the talk on the streets of New York for the whole year of 1934. All that people talked about was how good those colored people were performing at the Apollo Theater. Now, the show became so popular that the owners contacted Ralph Cooper once again. And they said, Cooper, man, that was just incredible what you people did. Is there another show you can bring here? And Ralph says, I have just a show for you. Now follow me on this one. Ralph Cooper told the owners, gentlemen, this time I want to bring to your theater the very first ever organized talent show done anywhere. But I normally do it on my radio show. They said, what did you just say? He says, I want to bring to your theater the very first ever organized talent show done anywhere. But I normally do it on my radio show. This is Cooper, this is 1934. There's no colored person's got a radio show in New York. Ralph said, that's not true. I have a radio show and I'm sure there are others. And they didn't believe him. So they said, okay, you claim you got a radio show? What's the name of it? Ralph Cooper says, gentlemen, my radio show is called the Harlem Amateur Hour Radio Show and is broadcast on radio station WMCA. And when Cooper told them that, they almost passed out. They said, wait a minute. That's your show? We listen to it every week. We didn't know it was a black, we didn't know it was a black guy. Well, Ralph says, now you do. I'm black, I'm Ralph Cooper, and that's my show. This is Cooper. We're gonna give you one chance to bring your show here and see whether it works. You're only gonna get one chance. Ralph brought his show here, but before kicking it off, Ralph Cooper changed the name of the radio show. He changed it from the Harlem Amateur Hour Radio Show to Amateur Night at the Apollo, which has now been going on every Wednesday night since that day for 78 years. Please give it up for Amateur Night at the Apollo. Before there was American Idol, there was Amateur Night at the Apollo. Before there was Star Search, there was Amateur Night at the Apollo. Some of us might remember back in the 50s, black and white TV, there was a white brother. His name was Ted Mack. He had a TV show called the Ted Mack Original Amateur Hour. Even before his show, there was Amateur Night at the Apollo. Check out the names of some people who started their career right here as amateurs. Amateurs are people who don't get paid to perform or play sports. Once you get paid, you're considered professional. The first female to win the Amateur Night competition, The first year it started, it was a 16-year-old girl by the name of Ella Fitzgerald. She was the very first. Then Sarah Vaughan does Amateur Night in 1937. Tony Bennett does it in 1940. Surprise, surprise. At that time, he was this skinny Italian kid from Queens. And Pearl Bailey, a friend of his, brought him here and he performed on Amateur Night. 3 years later, Tony Bennett comes back to perform at the Apollo Theater with this young black girl who had just won Amateur Night. Her name was Billie Holiday, all right? Then in 1953, Frankie Lyman, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Amateur Night. 1954, The Godfather's Old James Brown, Amateur Night. All right, then the Isley Brothers,
All right.
Gladys Knight and the Pips, Bobby Darin. Oh my God, that was the coolest white brother I ever seen in my life, was Bobby Darin. Oh, that shot man has big teeth. And it shows them a burly. Bobby Darin was the truth, believe what I tell you. Then we have Dionne Ward, Amateur Night contestant. Leslie Uggams, Amateur Night contestant. Luther Vandross, Lauryn Hill, Jasmine Sullivan. That's the girl who got that record out. I broke the windows out your car. Then you got Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, my main man, Adam Sandler, who owes me $8.75. Ever since 1989. When I was an usher here, Adam and Chris Rock was always chasing behind Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper, come on, man. Give us 3 minutes, please, man. Oh, Cooper, come on. 3 minutes, man. We just want to do 3 minutes of comedy. Come on. 3 minutes, man. Now we call up their agents. Could Adam come by for 3 minutes, please?